Welcome to Moments in History. Today, we'll be exploring the lesser-known, darker aspects of ancient Greece. While the civilization is famous for its philosophy, art, and architecture, there are also some unsettling truths about how sex and prostitution were viewed and regulated during this time. So, how might our understanding of this civilization change when we confront these uncomfortable realities? Stick with me until the end of the video to find out. 1. Porni areas. Imagine living in ancient Greece as a sex worker, forced into a life of hardship and exploitation. The Porni areas were your designated district, and it was where you called home and worked. These areas were recognized by their distinct architecture and establishments catering to sexual pleasure. Being a porni was dangerous, and many women faced violence, disease, and humiliation from society. Despite this, they played a significant role in Greek culture, providing an outlet for men who were unable to fulfill their desires within traditional social norms. However, it's crucial to recognize the exploitation and mistreatment these women faced. While they provided a necessary service, they were often viewed as immoral and corrupt. Sex work is still stigmatized and dangerous today, with many sex workers facing violence and discrimination. It's clear that we need to create a society where everyone has access to safe and fulfilling work. We need to address the stigma associated with sex work and recognize the agency and autonomy of those who choose it as a profession. While the porni areas in ancient Greece may seem like a relic of the past, their legacy still resonates today. By acknowledging the hardships these women faced, we can work towards creating a more equitable and just society. 2. Legalized prostitution. It's fascinating to see how even in ancient times, societies recognized the need for regulation of prostitution. While the concept of legalized prostitution may seem foreign to us today, the ancient Greeks had a more complex and practical approach towards sex work. However, it's important to note that just because prostitution was regulated does not mean that sex workers were treated fairly or justly. The environment surrounding sex work was prevalent even in ancient times, and the exploitation and mistreatment of women who worked in the sex industry were still common. It's heartbreaking to think about the challenges that these women faced and how little has changed in terms of stigma and violence against sex workers. While ancient Greece may have provided a unique approach to regulating prostitution, 3. Slave brothels. In ancient Greece, slavery was an accepted and widespread practice. These slaves were not only used for labor, but they were also forced into sexual servitude. Slave brothels were establishments where enslaved men and women were brought and sold for sexual purposes. These brothels were located in the same areas as the porni districts, and the slaves who worked there were viewed as commodities rather than people and were treated badly. Despite this, the owners of the brothels made a significant profit from the sale of enslaved people, including children. It's difficult to imagine the life that these enslaved individuals must have faced. Their lives were not their own, and they were subjected to violence, humiliation, and disease. The existence of slave brothels is a dark and disturbing aspect of ancient Greek history that reminds us of the horrors that can occur when people are treated as objects rather than human beings. It's essential that we remember these crimes so we can work towards building a more just and equitable society for all. 4. Temple prostitutes. Temple prostitutes were another part of ancient Greek sex work. They were part of the sacred temple hierarchy. In ancient Greece, many religious ceremonies involved sex, and temple prostitutes played a role in fulfilling these rituals. The temple prostitutes were often young girls who were selected from their families and brought to the temple to serve as sacred virgins. Once they reached puberty, they would engage in sexual acts with men who paid for the ritual. The money earned from this would then go towards supporting the temple and its priests. While the temple prostitutes were considered part of a sacred tradition, their lives were far from normal. They were kept isolated from the outside world, with limited contact with family and friends. In many cases, The temple prostitutes were forced into this life against their will and had no say in their destiny. They didn't have the right to choose their partner, and moreover, didn't have the choice to change their job. Once they were in the temple, their destiny would be decided by the priests. This culture showcases how much we have developed in the modern world. 5. Male prostitutes. You might be amused and surprised to this fact, but male prostitution, also known as male sex work, was another type of prostitution that existed in ancient Greece. Male prostitutes were men who sold sexual services to other men for payment. Like female prostitutes, male prostitutes worked in designated areas known as porni districts. These areas were marked by distinctive architecture and businesses that catered to sexual pleasure. Despite being a necessary service for some men, male prostitution was considered immoral by society. Male prostitutes faced many of the same dangers as female prostitutes, including violence, disease, and mistreatment. We must accept that sex work is still viewed negatively and risky today, and we need to strive for a fairer and more impartial society for all. If we respect the independence of sex workers, we can start combating the shame linked to sex work and guarantee a safer working environment. 6. Pederasty culture. Pederasty was one of the most controversial aspects of ancient Greek sexual culture. It was a sexual relationship between an adult man and a young boy, usually between the ages of 12 and 18. This practice was considered acceptable and even celebrated in some parts of ancient Greece, particularly in Athens. The older man would take the younger boy under his wing and educate him in various areas like philosophy and physical fitness. In return, the younger boy would provide sexual service to the older man. Pederasty was viewed as a normal and even desirable aspect of ancient Greek culture. It has caused a lot of harm. Many young boys were forced into these relationships, and the power imbalance between the older man and the younger boy often resulted in exploitation and abuse. The practice of pederasty was also limited to a select few, wealthy and powerful men, and it excluded women and those who did not fit the societal norms of masculinity. We need to acknowledge the negative impact pederasty had on society and work towards creating a much better world where everyone is respected and valued. 7. Public sexuality. Public sexuality in ancient Greece was common among its residents. This means that the Greeks were more open about sexuality than many other cultures throughout history. Men in Athens were expected to marry and have children, but extramarital sexual activity and same-sex relationships between men were accepted in certain contexts. Women had limited sexual freedom and were expected to remain virgins until marriage. In Sparta, young men were encouraged to form same-sex relationships to build loyalty and trust in military situations. Overall, public sexuality was shaped by cultural and social factors and varied depending on the context and individuals involved. Ancient Greek culture was more open about sexuality than many others, but it was not necessarily a perfect example of sexual freedom and equality. 8. Phallic imagery. Phallic imagery was another common but creepy sexual culture in ancient Greece. If you don't know what it means, phallic imagery is a form of art that depicts male genitalia, particularly the penis. This type of art was prevalent in ancient Greece and was often seen as a symbol of fertility and strength. It was believed that phallic imagery could ward off evil spirits and bring good luck to those who owned it. Phallic imagery was not limited to art. It was also present in religious rituals and festivals, where people would carry phallic symbols and make obscene gestures. In some cases, men would even dress up in phallic costumes and parade through the streets. While phallic imagery was considered an important part of Greek culture, it is important to note that it was not universally accepted. Some people found it offensive and vulgar, and there were even laws in place to regulate its use in certain contexts. It was just a strange and intriguing aspect of ancient Greek culture, and it was an important part of the way the Greeks understood and expressed their sexuality and spirituality. 9. Bestiality. This might sound creepy and gross, but some people in ancient Greece engaged in sexual activity with animals. This practice, known as bestiality, was not common, but there are some historical accounts that suggest it did occur. In some cases, bestiality was seen as a form of religious devotion. For example, the goddess Demeter was associated with a cult that engaged in bestiality as a way of celebrating her fertility and connection to the earth. However, bestiality was generally considered taboo in ancient Greece and was punishable by law. Those who engaged in the practice were often seen as perverted and were ostracized from society. While bestiality may seem shocking and disturbing to us today, it was a part of the complex and varied sexual culture of ancient Greece. However, it is important to view it in its historical context and to recognize that it is not a behavior that should be condoned or accepted in modern society. Thank you for watching this episode of Moments in History. We hope you found it informative. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. We would love to hear your thoughts, so make sure you leave a comment down below. Thank you for your support, and we'll see you in the next episode.